Support for WMNF comes from listeners like you and the Times Festival of Reading on Saturday, November 11th. The festival brings authors writing about today's compelling topics and most read fiction for discussions about their books. This year, the Times Festival of Reading will be at the Palladium in St. Petersburg. More information at festivalofreading.com. That's one word, festivalofreading.com.
Today we bring you an encore presentation of Wavemakers. Janet and Tom will be back with a new show November 14th. We are not taking calls this hour.
Good morning and welcome to Wavemakers with Janet and Tom, a weekly conversation with people making a difference in the Tampa Bay region. I'm Janet.
And I'm Tom.
And handling the board for us today is the well-preserved John Dunn. Answering the phones is DJ Spaceship. If you want to join our conversation, you can call us at 813-239-9663 and DJ Spaceship will get you through to us. You can also email us at dj@wmnf.org or text us at 813-433-0885.
May is Mental Health Awareness Month, both nationally and here at WMNF. So we're closing out Wavemakers this month with Carrie Zeiss, President and CEO of Tampa Bay Thrives, a nonprofit established in 2019 in response to the region's enormous mental health needs. Tampa Bay Thrives focuses on navigating the mental health care system, expanding access, and reducing the stigma associated with mental health struggles. Welcome to Wavemakers, Carrie.
Thank you so much.
According to a survey conducted by Tampa Bay Thrives, nearly 50% of residents in the Bay Area said in the past 12 months they needed help for emotional or mental health problems. And 70% said they had at least one poor mental health day a month. So we know the need is there. And yet, according to Mental Health America, Florida ranks 49th nationally in terms of access to health care. Carrie, those are some pretty astounding numbers.
You don't get much lower than 49th.
Not much. But what are we talking about when we're talking about mental health? It's a very broad topic. Everyone has different needs and struggles are different. What are you seeing at Tampa Bay Thrives?
So it is a broad topic, and just to give you a sense of how long it can take for someone to realize they actually need to get formal help, it's between 5 and 15 years from the first onset of symptoms. So those days when you're not feeling so great, or you're struggling a little bit to get out of bed, or your emotions are higher than others, if you don't have the resources or skills or tools or coping techniques to take care of yourself early, those symptoms can exacerbate until they reach a crisis point. And mental health is really almost anywhere on that spectrum. The questions that we asked in that survey were subjective, so people self-defined. But, we asked, how many days did you miss from work, or did you struggle in getting through the day and engaging, with your normal activities? And those are all considered part of the mental health issue.
Are there specific conditions that you see most frequently? Can you quantify that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a free navigation line meant for individuals who are in that mild to moderate stage. We do have lots of strong crisis-related response programs in the Tampa Bay region, but the Let's Talk program and number is really meant for those early, where should I go? What am I feeling? I will say that anxiety, depression, and relational problems are the top 3 reasons month after month that people call. We helped about 2,000 people last year, and that number is increasing steadily. And those are a majority of the reasons why people are calling.
Anxiety, depression, and relationship issues.
Yep. So family fights, breaking up with a significant other, those kinds of things often are the items that get someone to call.
You've only been around for 4 years, established in 2019. How did that come about?
So 30 leaders came together over 2 days of a very intensive summit. Hospital systems, public safety, schools officials, and they really, chewed on that question of, we're investing in mental health. We've got great programs, and there really are great programs in the Tampa Bay area. But despite that, the community mental health needs assessment surveys that the hospitals administer every 3 years continue to show that mental health concerns were at the top of the list of needs. So people weren't getting better. And this was in 2018-19, before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So these leaders decided to do something a little bit differently and invested in standing up us, which is a separate 501c3. And our whole reason to to be here is to help fill gaps, not to compete, but to add to the system, to find ways to test innovative solutions to help us, reach velocity and speed even faster in the community.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Wavemakers on WMNF, and our guest today is Carrie Zeiss from Tampa Bay Thrives, and we're talking about mental health on this May Mental Health Awareness Month, and talking about issues that people have with access. What we're talking about right now is access. You mentioned the pandemic. We were talking a little bit about what are some of the conditions people have. You have, anxiety, depression, and relationship issues. What are some of the causes? You mentioned the pandemic. Did the pandemic see a spike in those kinds of in mental health issues?
Yeah,
and do they linger?
Yeah, without a doubt, they did. They did increase. I think actually, in some ways, it was an opportunity for a young organization like us because mental health had never been in the national conversation in a stronger way than it was the first couple of years. However, what that did was it really shined a spotlight on how difficult it can be to find appointments, to get to care, to manage your symptoms while you're waiting to talk to someone else. Those symptoms they are persisting. I pulled a couple of statistics from the Kaiser Family Foundation, just updated their study, and that, while reported symptoms of mental health crisis have begun to decrease, there's areas that are of real concern. So substance use issues are coming to the fore, fentanyl-related overdoses, alcohol-related deaths. Those are, people typically go towards substances when they're trying to feel better. Suicidality is on the increase, particularly in our young people. And people who provide services have left the field in higher rates than seen previously. So there's a real supply issue.
And you mentioned young people, and apparently we have a real crisis going on among young people. I was reading some statistics about how in 2019, 13% of adolescents reported having a major depressive episode, a 60% increase from 2007, and that was, again, before the pandemic. Emergency room visits by children and adolescents in that period also rose sharply for anxiety, mood disorders, and self-harm. And for people 10 to 24, that's young, suicide rates, which were stable, leaped nearly 60% by 2018. So what is it you think is causing this particular crisis among this group of folks?
I mean, there's lots of theories. There is certainly, for school-age kids, I think the prevalence of school shooting drills, we've heard that's causing some persistent anxiety because it's ongoing. The impacts of social media, being able to see what is happening around you where you may or may not be included, incidences of, sort of bullying, cyberbullying, in-person bullying, certainly all create sort of a pressure cooker environment where, kids are struggling to figure out how to navigate and manage their mental health. And the Surgeon General just issued a warning about social media and calling for more investigation and standards and some guidelines, I guess, for parents. Does Tampa Bay Thrives have any suggestions for parents who are dealing with this? Because, it's tough to say no to a kid who really wants to be on Insta or whatever. Yeah. So in that same report, the Surgeon General did flag that, 3 hours, and kids who have more than 3 hours of daily exposure to social media really are at higher risk for struggling with their mental health, the anxiety and depression. And our average of young kids' screen time is about 3.5 hours. So, a significant protective factor for, kids and high school kids, teenagers, is an engaged parent. So a parent who knows where their kid is, who they're with, is checking in more regularly, is one of those statistically proven evidence-based, protective factors that can help. So engage in conversations about how much social media your kid is consuming, how many hours. Put a timer on the phone to shut it off after a certain period of time, and talk about, and model, good use of social media yourself. Don't sit with your phone at the dinner table and then expect to say, hey, don't check your phone so often if you can't disconnect yourself. We have an email from Bubba who says, I think that DeSantis targeting LGBTQ people and Black Hispanic people will make mental health issues even worse in Florida. I'm tired of DeSantis bullying the most vulnerable people. If you'd like to send us an email on this topic, mental health, you can send us an email to dj@wmnf.org, and you can also call us at 813-239-9663.
We have an email from David Bryant, and he wants to know, Carrie, what you think about the ads on TV for antidepressant medication. It seems like they are pushing it to help increase sales, but not necessarily to help people who need it. I always find it odd when I hear a pharma ad rattling off side effects like suicidal thoughts from various drugs they are pushing. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I do think that there is a role for antidepressants in treating mental health, but it has to be a holistic experience in terms of your exposure to messaging. And, learning how to manage your symptoms day to day while using appropriate clinical interventions like antidepressants, is important, but you have to balance the messaging overall.
One of the things that you, that is, I think, surrounds mental health issues, and is something that you are focusing on, is the issue of stigma and around that. People don't really want to talk about it. And we have with us in the studio Mary Kay Dwyer, who is with the marketing firm Stevie and Fern, and this is a company that helped put together a campaign for Tampa Bay Thrives called If You Know, You Know. And tell us about that, Mary Kay. What is that campaign all about?
So the If You Know, You Know campaign really came about because we were thinking about ways to create real change and drive people to solutions. And we thought a great way of doing that would be through storytelling. Because a lot of times when someone's saying that they have resources for mental health, it's just kind of like, if you need help, reach out. But we wanted to tell stories that were real, that were hopefully will be a beacon of hope, because we've actually gone through it. Those people telling the stories actually shared my story as well. I had been, about 12 years ago, I had been really, really depressed. It was a lot of things going on. I was actually suicidal. I came really close to doing that. And I actually got on antidepressants. I didn't want to, but I didn't want to do anything. But I forced myself into therapy, which I didn't want to do, but I did. And I got antidepressants, which I didn't want to do, but I did. And I was only on them for a short term. So that kind of, it saved my life. It saved my life because it gave me the time to actually look into other ways of healing myself. I started going to yoga. I went to acupuncture. I started meditating. I started writing. So I like to say, we want people to find the help that works for them, because it's not always traditional therapy that can help you. There's lots of different things. The most important thing is to keep trying. Like, no one is going to pick you up and put you into therapy. You have to be the person that does that first step. But once you do those first steps, hopefully, even if it doesn't work, like that, my talk therapy session was a disaster, but I just was like, well, I'm not going to let that stop me, and I'm not going to let this kill me. So I just kept going to different things and trying different things and I just kept putting one foot in front of the other until I could make it through.
Did you find a different therapist?
I did not. I ended up going to acupuncture, and he kind of became my therapist in a way. He listened to me. Maybe it's because I also went to therapy when I was a kid, and it was kind of forced on me. So I had like a bad association with talk therapy personally.
Well, because I think one of the challenges, if you are struggling with some sort of mental health issue, whether it's depression or anxiety or loneliness, or there's relationship problems, is finding the right therapist.
Right.
And sometimes it takes more than one.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about the If You Know, You Know campaign. How does that work? You told your story.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to tell their story, how do they work? How does that work? How is the campaign working?
So basically it's two-pronged. We have a website that is kind of the hub of all the stories and also all of the resources. So but the main point of sharing is through social media. So I actually shared my story last week, and I'm not like a giant social media person, but it got so much traction, and I got so much love from it, and people shared it. And I hope that everybody that does submit their story shares their story on social media, because it's one thing to read it on a website, but it's totally different when you are personally putting it out there to your friends and family. It's very vulnerable.
Are you making a video, or are they?
So it's written stories.
Written stories, okay.
And you submit a photo, and so that hopefully those people can see within the story and maybe the photo something they connect with.
Okay, gotcha. In the spirit, if you know, you know, I'll say I've gone to therapy off and on since I was like 6. Mm-hmm. My mom started taking me because I was like super anxious and had all kinds of phobias and stuff. So, like temporary goes off and on, and you say you try all different kinds of things. I found mindfulness to be really helpful. Mm-hmm. Funny, I went to a mindfulness center for a fabulous meditation session, and 3 of my former therapists were there. So they were obviously trying that. And it was much cheaper, I want to tell you, to go to the mindfulness center than going to therapy. Yeah. We have an email. We have from Bob Pope Jr. He says, I've been in AA for quite a while, and I'm seeing more and more young people coming in for help. They're drinking harder in the younger years. I heard a statement last night that there are 11 AA meetings in Gainesville, and that's not near enough. So that's interesting, and thank you for sharing your story, Bob. If anybody wants to email us at dj@wmnf.org and tell their story or ask a question, you can do that at dj@wmnf.org, or you can call us at 813-239-9663. We have a caller on the line right now. I'm trying to get, and it's not working. But, okay, let's talk a little bit more then about the If You Know, You Know. How many stories do you have up now? Do you know?
We have 20 stories up on the website right now and 4 more that are in development. In the month, it launched May 1st, and it's been seen 9,000 times, shared over 300 times across various social media platforms.
And where can people find these?
The iykyk.tampabaythrives.org. And there is a video. We've got one video short of 4 storytellers that's there too, if people want to just experience that as well.
And you started this for in May, the beginning of May, for National Mental Health Awareness Month. Is it going to continue, or?
It is ongoing. We're hoping that this becomes a hub where people, who are considering looking for help or just, we know from the Let's Talk line that most people find the line through Googling, right? So they're looking for mental health help, they call. We're hoping that this will be a similar resource for people who are early stage and trying to figure out all of those questions, like, does someone like me need therapy? What has worked for other people? Because it's not just therapy. It's we've talked about acupuncture. Mm-hmm. There's lots of other meditation, journaling. There are things that you can do to manage your mental health before you go into that route.
And before you get to a point where you are suicidal, it's all levels of, it doesn't have to be as drastic as my story. Some of the stories are different.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we were just talking about was about the difficulty of finding the right provider or the right kind of care. And that is something that you guys do. Tampa Bay Thrives helps with that. One of your navigation as one of your sort of pillars of your mission. So tell us about how that works.
Yeah, so that was the area that we really targeted first when we launched, because the pandemic happened very quickly after I started. There was all of this need for mental health. People were talking about it in ways they hadn't before. So we decided, instead of going into the anti-stigma area and the awareness campaign, to instead focus on pathways. So we created the Let's Talk line, which is 844-UOK. It is free. You can call and talk to a counselor to try to find out what kind of help do I need. You might not need therapy. There might be other self-coping techniques that they can give you. We've built a resource database, and we continue to add to it every day, of providers who are, you might have insurance and you look and you don't know if the providers that are listed, what kinds of therapy they provide. Do they look like you? Do they speak your language? Are they someone who can help with the issue that's presenting for you? The Let's Talk counselors can help with that. Mm-hmm. And then last year in May, we announced with our hospital partners and with the Crisis Center and USF an extension that we call Access to Quick Care. So not only can you navigate now, but you have several different options for getting short-term appointments. So there is a licensed clinical social worker available at a TGH Fast Track clinic. You can access a telehealth therapy appointment through a walk-in Walgreens center through the Let's Talk line. And if you have an appointment, but it's say 4 weeks, 5 weeks out, and you don't know if you can kind of hold steady, through the Let's Talk Bridge program, we'll give you 4 free sessions of counseling with the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay so that you can stay stable and not get into the emergency room.
Can you give an email address or the web address right now or phone number? Well, let's repeat it multiple times over the next half hour.
844-UOK. YOUOKAY, and then the website is letstalktampabay.org.
Letstalktampabay.org. And what was the phone number again? It's
844-UOK.
YOUOK. We got Sam in Tampa is on the line. Let's talk to Sam in Tampa. Sam, you're on the line. What's on your mind?
Hi, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. I've always had an issue with, I don't know when it started, when they started calling it talk therapy. Because it's my understanding that, you get help, of course you talk, but you also take suggestions, and it's the application of those suggestions that actually helps you through the crisis. So I don't understand. I mean, talk never did anything for me. And when we call it talk therapy, I feel like it diminishes what they're doing. Mm-hmm. In a way, how they're trying to help.
What do you think, Carrie? Is that trying to distinguish talk therapy from perhaps medical therapy or, pharmaceutical therapy? What's the difference?
Yeah, I think it may be just terminology. The caller's absolutely right. I mean, you learn, skills. You can go through, some techniques like, rapid eye hand response within a therapy session that actually can help deprogram some of your instant reactions that you have to triggering incidences. So he's absolutely right.
Talking's not enough is what you're saying, exactly. Sam, right?
Absolutely. And by calling it talk therapy, I think it cheapens the deal of what we're trying to do here, or what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, and I think that's what you would be able to find practitioners through Tampa Bay Thrives that use different types of techniques more than just talking, like you said, cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever, where you could find a practitioner who would give you a technique beyond just talking about your mom.
Right.
But I guess talking about it helps identify what the perhaps source of the problem is.
Yeah.
Is it a yeah. So.
And
you got to talk about it until you can figure out the solutions, right?
And very interestingly, some of the things that we're actually finding when we do the analysis on the Let's Talk line is for some individuals, that talking about it sometimes can be enough if you're, moderate enough. So, people show up with a range of severity and needs.
Right. Thanks for the call, Sam.
Thank you.
And if you have a call, you can give us a call at 813-239-9663. If you have a question or a comment, you want to share your story about struggling with mental health issues, you can email us at dj@wmnf.org or call us at 813-239-9663. We're here with Mary Kay Dwyer and Carrie Zeiss of Tampa Bay Thrives, and we're talking about Mental Health Awareness Month and navigating the mental health care system and getting access to health care and removing the stigma that's associated with these kinds of health care issues.
So the pandemic had obviously lots of negative consequences, but some positive things did come out of it. One, for example, is there's a lot more virtual therapy that's available as a result of people being isolated and locked down. A lot of therapists began offering their services virtually, either through Zoom or perhaps phones. And I think, say 10 years ago, that was not so common. Would you agree? And has that been a benefit?
Huge benefit. In fact, it's very exciting. Just this past week, the governor did sign legislation which enables some of those pandemic era, telehealth extensions to continue. So now we will be able to access telehealth via telephone. We're engaged in a multi-state compact, so providers out of state can help provide therapy here, which is really great because there is a shortage of therapists, and those telehealth options, the technology options like apps that can queue you as well are super important in providing enough support for people who are looking for help now.
Yeah, because we talked about how important it is to find the right therapist who can treat your issues in the right way, and sometimes they might not live in your community. And,
that's right.
And this gives you the opportunity to access that service without having to drive 2 hours to see a therapist, then drive home 2 hours.
Exactly.
So that's a good benefit.
You guys have been around since 2019. You received some funding through the American Rescue Plan?
We did, yes.
And that continues for how long? How long will you have that funding for?
2024, and that helps support the operations of the Let's Talk Lyme Plus the Access program in Hillsborough County. It also supported some of our anti-stigma work, some of our market research, and focus groups. So we're continuing to really dig into what are some of the root cause issues behind the mental health crunch that we're experiencing.
And then you also tell us what happened back in December of 2022. You had a social media moment with a Tampa Bay Lightning player that resulted in quite a few donations for Tampa Bay Thrives. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, wow, that was amazing. So I will say I'm from Boston myself, and I was never as dissatisfied with the Boston Bruins sportscaster as I was. We got a call from the Lightning saying that Pat Maroon had been, playing a game with the Bruins, and in essence, the sportscaster had essentially said some derogatory things about Pat Maroon's weight. And he got off the ice, and his teammates told him, and just being an incredible class act, Pat decided to put out sort of a statement via Twitter saying, I support, words matter. And they do really matter. And he was going to support mental health and, speaking up.
He was a Bruins player.
No, he's a Tampa Bay Lightning player, sort of acting out against the Tampa Bay Lightning player. Sort of, it was the Bruins sportscaster who was body shaming him.
Gotcha.
And he just said this isn't okay, but decided instead to use his influence and his platform to raise up that issue of
he said, I am going to make a donation to Tampa Bay Thrives in the name of this sportscaster who body shamed me.
Yes, and encouraged others to do the same. And, we're a small little nonprofit. We have never seen so many small donations, large donations come in. It was just an incredible amount of media attention for us. And to just, spread that awareness. I mean, words really do matter. So taking that moment to just think about what you were saying to someone, not knowing where they are that day, you can have an incredible influence on them. And Pat Maroon is just a class act. We are so grateful for the Lightning for being such great partners.
And your board, you mentioned what brought you together. There were 30 people, and there are people from hospitals, school systems, law enforcement throughout the region. It looks like it's Pasco, Polk, Hillsborough, Pinellas, largely those four. And tell me about the law enforcement involvement. Why is that important, and why do they care?
Well, I mean, so many calls coming into 911 lines actually have mental health kind of overlap, which is one of the reasons why the 988 line was established this past year, is to have a more dedicated national number to help respond to some of these mental health crises. Law enforcement officers are not trained on managing mental health, and they shouldn't be put in that position of having to do that work. And we see more and more really interesting and innovative models happening in our region. The Tampa Police Department, the Pasco Sheriff's Office all have behavioral health teams that are working hand in hand with responders to try to, make sure that they're treating the person and the issue instead of...
Do you work with the law enforcement agencies? Do you do any work with them in terms of training or going with them on calls?
We have two board members. So we've got the sheriff of Pasco County and the
Clearwater Police.
Sorry, and then the chief of police for Clearwater, or just recently is leaving his position. But we've got them helping us think about where we can provide the best support. They often have large budgets, these law enforcement offices, and do have a lot of training. So we're trying to figure out how do we connect the gap again. So make space for partnerships that might not necessarily be as seen from each person working in their own silo.
We'll be back right after this. We're going to talk some more with Carrie Zeiss from Tampa Bay Thrives and Mary Kay Dwyer about Mental Health Awareness Month and getting mental health care, navigating the system, access, and removing the stigma associated with mental health struggles. We'll be back right after this.
There's no party like a house party, and the best house party is heard right here on WMNF. The Saturday Night House Party is heard Saturdays from 8 to 10 p.m. and hosted by yours truly, DJ Sinflow. The best in old school dance music, hip-hop, soul can be heard on the house party. So tune in and let us bring the party to you, the Saturday Night House Party.
And we're back. So one of the biggest things that you guys are doing is navigation. Do you guys act as a referral program for people, basically?
Exactly. The database that we're developing has all kinds of practitioners, support groups, peer resources that are there. So, it is more than just what therapist would work for me. It's what are my options and what can I do next?
Well, cost is often a factor for folks.
Yes.
Obviously, insurance will cover, depending on the insurance you have. What about those folks who are accessing the healthcare system through Medicaid or the Hillsborough County Health Plan? Do they provide mental health services?
Yeah, and you can find those referrals through Let's Talk. So and actually one of our immediate care partners is Northside Behavioral Health, which is for someone who's uninsured, so that there's an option for those people to get quickly into care. But cost came up several times in our market research. 40% of people said cost was the biggest issue, keeping them from reaching out and getting help. And then my insurance doesn't cover it, which is really a cost-related thing, was 18%. So if you add those things together, you see there's a double impact.
What about Obamacare? Does Obamacare cover mental health services? I thought that doesn't the ACA require a certain amount of mental health care coverage?
There is a requirement for mental health parity, so that included in the ACA, and so that is in your plan. So if you have health insurance, you certainly should go to the health insurance plan and see what they cover. I think the underlying issue is not being sure, is that directory, does that show you who you need to talk to? And you can use multiple avenues, like use your insurance directory, talk to a Let's Talk counselor, and then, look at some reviews to see what others' experience of that provider are.
What about even covering it, though? Health insurance, just even covering so is it decent? Do you wish it was more?
I wish it was more. Of course I do. I wish we had more providers. I wish it was easier to get coverage. I wish it was as simple as a $25, copay, like if you were going to, to see your doctor for every single one. Certainly we have lots of work to do in this area.
Well, if someone calls your toll-free number, and give us that number again.
844-UK.
And you recommend someone, but sometimes it's hard to get in. It might take 2, 3, 4 weeks to get an appointment.
Yep.
If someone's having a crisis, how do you deal with that?
Well, if they're having a crisis, they will be, connected to crisis resources, of which we do have some. So we have, across the region, the 988 number is everywhere. There are mobile crisis response, organizations. So there are responses. If someone they're not in crisis, but they're just not feeling great, they're eligible to get into the Free Bridge program. So if you have an appointment,
tell us about that. What's the Free Bridge program?
So if you have, you have an appointment in 4 weeks, but you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you need some coping skills, you can get up to 4 free sessions with a therapist at the Let's Talk line, just to help you.
Over the phone.
Over the phone, to telehealth.
Someone who can help you through whatever it is that maybe they won't consider it a crisis, but if they're not sleeping, if they're depressed, if they're having trouble getting through work.
Yeah, it impacts your daily performance.
Right.
How you are with your family.
And you want to get people before they're suicidal, for goodness sakes, right? I mean, that's really past where you want to be.
Yeah. I mean, the easier you get treatment, just like for any, issue, if your ankle is bothering you a little bit, you would probably treat it and ice it and rest it before you would, do something that might make it break. That's always a better.
Mary Kay, what prompted you to finally reach out and get some help?
Well, I thought it couldn't get any worse, so I was like, what do I have to lose, really? Honestly, it was that bad. But to Carrie's point, if something had existed that was so easy to find resources at the time that I was going through something in 2010, and maybe there was, but I didn't know how to find it, it might have made things a little bit easier to find the right therapist, or maybe even just get involved sooner. I kind of had like a catalytic point where I went through a bad breakup, but it wasn't just the breakup that was sending me into this tailspin. Obviously, I had things that I had not dealt with for my whole life that I probably should have been dealing with, and I'm still dealing with them. I mean, I went to a hypnotherapy session last week and to help deal with anxiety, and it was wonderful. So again, still it's a work in progress, but as long as I'm not at that point where I was suicidal, it's very scary.
There's different tools and techniques you can rely on to help you out of that, right?
Yeah.
And have you heard from others who have been in similar situations as a result of this campaign?
Not just yet. I mean, not personally. From sharing my story, though, I did get a lot of people reaching out to me that were friends. I'm still friends with them, but maybe we don't talk every day. But they reached out and they were like, I had no idea. I had no idea it was that bad. And that's because when you're in that situation, you don't tell anyone. You don't want to worry people. And you're just hoping you're going to make it through. And no one else, your friends alone can't save you anyway.
Or maybe you think you're alone. You don't think other people are having the same issues. Or
Well, I thought everyone was just going to think, oh, you're just going through a breakup, get over it. But it was so much more than a breakup. It wasn't the breakup. It was my whole life.
Everything else, right? Yeah, it's kind of brought everything to the surface.
Yeah.
You guys also do research. Can you tell us about that? What research are you doing? You did the survey. Is there other research that you're doing?
So we're just repeating now our second annual we call it the market research survey. It's to get a sense of the sort of the state of mental health across the region, just so we can see if we're having any impact and are people getting better, and to understand what's happening kind of in a quicker turn. We're doing focus groups right now. We just completed focus groups with Hillsborough County, and we're currently doing them in Pasco, Pinellas, and Polk with various populations. So this survey gives us kind of the quantitative data, but we're trying to get underneath that and find out, like, what are, we heard in the data that individuals, while they would say, I accept someone who's struggling with mental health, they wouldn't necessarily feel that someone else would feel that way about them, which indicates that there is some underlying stigma that we haven't completely broken down. And we see that in the focus groups. We even see that in trying to recruit for the focus groups. There are certain kind of pockets that are very difficult to get to. The boomers are kind of, tend to be harder to. Boomers and the silent generation tend to not want to necessarily engage in discussions about mental health in a group setting, where younger people, college-age students, are much more willing to raise their hand and say, yeah, I want to share.
Well, that seems to be a thing. Like they're like on TikTok and on, social media, they talk a lot about their anxieties and insecurities. There's a lot more of that.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, we talked earlier about the negative impact of social media, particularly on teens. I guess there's a flip side to that. I mean, you're using social media to get this message out. Are there resources online that you recommend that people go to? Are there, TikTok influencers on mental health? Or how can you steer people to more positive social media?
Yeah. I mean, I do follow some accounts. I think it's finding like the right combination of accounts that speak to the concerns that you have. I mean, for me, it was, parenting. I personally don't drink, so it was like following people who also had made that same choice, because I've got anxiety. That's like gas in the fire for my anxiety. I follow, it's like lots of different accounts. I don't want to necessarily name one in particular because they kind of fit for my combination, but look for like hashtags. So, look for parenting and stress if that's like one of your concerns. Look for,
you can control your algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like refine that.
It doesn't have to be all Karens and cops behaving badly.
That's my TikTok feed.
That's right.
Karens, out of control Karens, and cops behaving badly. And I feel badly about my country when I watch too many of these TikTok videos.
Yeah. There are inspirational ones.
It could be, I don't know if it's the Chinese government trying to make me feel bad about my country, but it's not a positive experience.
There's a newsletter called Reasons to be Cheerful. I will just say that's very innocuous, but lots of good news that comes out once a week.
Yeah. You can definitely pick the things that make you happy. Mine's all fluffy cats. That's good, That's all I need. Fluffy cats and food.
I have a lot of middle-aged women dancing. We have an email or a voice text message, that says, my sister's insurance refused to pay for cognitive behavioral therapy if she wasn't having suicidal ideologies? Are there CBT support groups that offer support for free? Is there anything like that?
That is a question I would definitely call the Let's Talk line to answer. And also I would say, really be persistent. Like, it sometimes going back to, your primary care doctor and having them help you advocate to your insurance company to make sure that you can get the support. You shouldn't have to wait until you're suicidal to get support, but be real persistent with your insurance company and advocate for yourself.
Well, Mary Kay, was your hypnotherapy covered by insurance?
No, I don't have insurance, so I'm just living on the wild side or on the edge. So,
and how does I've heard of hypnotherapy for helping smokers kick the habit.
So she said she doesn't do that.
And how did it work for you?
So I have a lot of anxiety, especially around doing this, public speaking.
You seem
doing
fine.
great.
I'm breathing. Maybe it cured me. I don't know. But it's not like the movie Office Space where, she snaps her fingers and you never go back to work again. But it's kind of like a deep meditative state that she puts you in. And she kind of talks about all of the different things that are bothering you. Also dove a little bit into my childhood. And then she makes up this mantra. She records it for you. I have a 20-minute recording of her, and I listen to it when I go to sleep at night. And I've been doing that every night. And I was listening to it in the car before this.
Well, I think it must have helped because you seem fine.
I'm usually fine once it's happening.
If you want to join our conversation today, call us at 813-239-9663. Are you having a mental health issue? Do you know anyone who needs some help with their mental health issues? You can also email us at dj@wmnf.org or text us at 813-433-0885. And in the spirit of if you know, you know, if there's anyone out there who's willing to share their story, we would love to hear it. Is there a crisis that you're dealing with now? Is there a crisis that you went through? Or are there issues that your family members are going through that you need some help with? Please give us a call at 813-239-9663.
You guys also do advocacy, and I want to talk about that because we've had a couple, interestingly, on this show, we've had two people who've commented about DeSantis. One person saying, the latest one was, if Florida is 49 out of 50 states for mental health care access, we've shared that statistics, then it stands to reason you'd be crazy to vote for Ron DeSantis. Yet you just told us about something that the governor just signed that expands access to mental health care through telehealth. Was that something you all advocated for? Are there other policies that you advocate for? And how does that work in terms of advocacy? Do you get involved in the legislature or state and federal lawmaking?
Yeah. So we don't actively lobby right now for anything. We're monitoring bills. We're trying to understand among our community members and coalition members, where's there commonality in where we can bring our voices together to say we know that this is important as a region, and we knew that those telehealth bills that we just talked about are important because there are not enough providers right now. That's what's driving that statistic, which actually got a little bit better, I would say, in the most recently released report. We're now 46, not 49.
Okay.
But the access issue is around how easy is it to find appointments. And one of the biggest issues for us here in Florida is we have less behavioral health providers than other states. And so
why is that? Florida, it seems like Florida would need more.
Well, it could be
we are known for Florida Man and the insane things people do here. This is like a retention pond for all the crazy people.
We're growing, right? We're growing as a state. When you're growing, that means like the supply of providers you have doesn't necessarily grow in line with the number of people who are moving here. So that is a part of it. Another part of it is reimbursement rates and how much people can get back for their services through reimbursed rates through Medicaid, Medicare, and insurance. That's something that we're looking at and trying to understand. It takes a while to grow a behavioral health pool, right? So you've got to tell kids that this is a great career path and how much you can make, and encourage them to take courses and get through school, and that takes time. But we're looking at the problem from a bunch of different ways, because that is really the crux of the issue, is having enough providers.
And who are the folks that you are reaching, and who are the folks that you are having trouble reaching, or what demographic groups or racial groups or economic groups?
Yeah,
who's accessing your service, and who are you trying to reach that you're not?
We're trying to really make sure that anyone who has a need knows where to get help. I mean, so it's a broad population that we're serving, but we do know that there are groups where there are cultural issues. So Black populations, Hispanic populations can have some cultural barriers that get in the way around feeling comfortable talking to a medical professional, but maybe might be more willing to go see a faith-based leader who could maybe help them figure out where to go. So we try to figure out how to make those connections. We know that our LGBTQ population is experiencing quite a bit of stress right now, particularly in our state. And that's a group where, you think about social connectedness is also one of those things that helps us feel like we thrive. And when you feel like you're being othered and you don't have a place at the table, that creates an environment that you don't feel safe being who you are. And so we know that we have to make sure that there's lots of inroads to help people who are looking for help there.
Is the Tampa Bay area different? Do you have a sense of the mental health, I guess to say, mental health stability of Tampa Bay area? How do we compare to other parts, the rest of the state? Do we know that?
Yeah, we do have some statistics on providers, on a per capita population, and that, our counties, the counties that we serve, are under some state averages, but our state averages are underneath national averages, right? So you sort of have an increasingly worse situation, right? So that's where we're trying to focus on. At one level, how do we help the individual who is looking for support? And that's with our programs like the Access Program, the Let's Talk line, the Decreasing Stigma. I will also say that we offer a lot of support through our Mental Health America affiliate. So screenings, toolkits, we have purpose-recorded meditation. So we have lots of ways that an individual can get some support, and you can find those all on the
you actually have
website.
videos and webinars and all that sort of thing on the website.
Exactly. Yeah. And then we're trying to attack
that website address again?
So letstalktampabay.org is where you can find all of that information that will help you, where you can sign up for the newsletter, where you can see those individual sort of, recorded meditations. You can also, if campaign is for decreasing stigma. That's iykyk.tampabaythrives.org. And then tampabaythrives.org is where if you're an employer or you have a big team or you want to be part of the systems level change, that's where we publish our research. It's where we have the webinars that we're hosting right now on the behavioral health workforce. We're trying to really come up with a keen sense of what the demand will be in the future and how can we develop some strategies to help increase that supply of workers. So we're looking at the problem from multiple lenses to try to to fix it, because you can't just look at one here. Right. It's not just a consumer need, it's the fact that the system itself needs to change.
Well, and interestingly, when you look at the Mental Health America website, and it has the rankings for how do you rank in terms of your adult mental health and teen youth mental health and access, we're kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of the mental health, so to speak, of the state.
Yeah.
But where we tank is in access. So that's what actually hurts our ranking, because we're kind of in the middle. That's our weak point as a state anyway.
Yep, you were exactly right.
Because it's sunshiny in Florida, and people are relatively speaking, we're middle of the pack, like I said.
It is true. We don't have the same. I come from New England originally. Seasonal affective disorder is a real thing, and then you don't see that kind of systemic issue here.
Now, what about summertime with kids? Because when kids are in school, they're engaged, and do you see a difference for kids during the summertime when they don't have as much structure as they usually do?
I think it varies. In some ways, the kids can get more social. Parents and families who need support that get support from schools really struggle. So some families do really rely on schools to provide food and meals and, kind of more wraparound structures than they can access in the summer. And that's where you see kind of subset populations beginning to struggle even more so.
Well, you also have a lack of guidance counselors in schools. I mean, not just guide you through, your academic programs in school, but to help you with whatever mental health challenges you might be having. So is that an area that you think needs to be improved as well? More money needs to be provided for schools to help the students?
Right now, we're actually we have a new employee who's joining us this month. We are spending some more concentrated time to try to understand what you're describing as that in-school, out-of-school balance for families. And we have been called in on a couple of occasions where people have said, it's tragic, but a suicide happens, and you have supports in schools, but what you don't have supports for are for the troop leader of a Boy Scout troop, say, that has to come together with the troop the next day and know how to support the kids and also how to support themselves. They've just lost a member of the troop. And so what we know is that we've got to do more to understand what is the connection between in school and then out of school mental health for kids. And so we're building a plan over the next year so that we can, and a landscape assessment, so that we understand the programs, the gaps, and can figure out how we as a community can come together and fill it, because it's way too big for one organization to do alone.
Is it concerning? Well, you have your board members, of course, that represent all these different kinds of organizations, so that certainly helps. It's such a broad coalition. Is it concerning about sort of the stifling of conversation that we're seeing in the schools to you from a mental health perspective? I think one of our emails addressed that, the issue of LGBTQ or minority kids, and is that concerning from a mental health perspective?
Feeling connected, feeling seen, and feeling valued is a really important part of feeling like you matter. And the other thing is so important, and I personally worry is missing from some of our discussions is how often do you talk to someone who's exactly like you? Almost never, right? And so learning to hear different perspectives, to understand someone else's view, living with a heart full of compassion and empathy, I think it is an inclusivity in that regard is helpful for encouraging dialogue and finding solutions.
Well, we ask teachers to do a lot. And so including trying to figure out if a kid's having mental health challenges. But do you do training for teachers to help them with those kids?
So again, we're sort of this coalition, and we recommend pathways. So mental health first aid is an amazing training, and that exists for teachers. Actually, it's a requirement that most teachers get trained in mental health first aid, and most of the school districts really are on track to do that. There's also youth mental health first aid that is meant for kids, to train kids on how to recognize signs and how to safely intervene for a friend, because that's a scary thing to do, to approach someone and to ask them if they're okay and then know what to do with it and how to handle that responsibility. So we partnered with other organizations last year, Florida Blue, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Love for Lawrence Foundation, the School District for Hillsborough County, and we did the Strike the Stigma event. And part of that was having more mental health first aid training for teachers and identifying youth champions who would be willing to be trained to be kind of advocates and leaders within their own school. Those are those connections. When an event is happening, you've got great partners, how can you make sure that best practices are integrated? And then we bring in more people to the discussion. So I do think for us, probably we're going to see mental health first aid training for kids as one of those tools. If we can get more kids in our region trained on how to safely, responsibly identify needs of their peers, because they're going to see it that in a way that adults never do, that would be a really effective way to help support the mental health of kids.
And are you looking for more folks to share their stories, and how can they share those with you?
Yeah, we are, because we want people who come to the website to see themselves in those stories. And we do, men. Men don't talk about mental health that often. We have got some great stories.
Men don't talk about much about sports and politics.
Older folks. Everyone from every demographic. I think that goes back to that question about the stigma. We think this is a great way to kind of break that.
Yep. So emailing info@tampabaythrives.org is a great way to share your story. You can also reach out via our social media or go to the If You Know You Know campaign website, which is iykyk.tampabaythrives.org.
So if you have a story, to share and you didn't want to call the radio station today and share it, you can write your story and send it to info at
tampabaythrives.org.
And the phone number is 1-800
1-844-YOUOK.
YOUOK. 844-YOUOK.
I did one last quick question about the pandemic. I know when people were locked down and stuff, it was difficult. Are you seeing sort of the after effects of the pandemic? People still struggling to try to get out of that?
Yeah, I was talking to one of my hospital partners the other day. I mean, about this very thing. People are tired. While we're sort of back in kind of regular life, and I'm using air quotes, there are some lingering residual effects of some exhaustion. We're adjusting to having life resume at a similar tempo.
People are still a little nervous, I think. Some folks.
I think that's definitely true. And not sure, when to mask and all of that.
Well, Carrie, thanks for being with us today. Mary Kay, thank you for being with us today.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for sharing your story with others.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
DJ Spaceship, thanks for manning the phones. And John, thank you for manning the board. We will be back next week. And then it's not too early to donate. You can go to WMNF.org and hit the tip jar today. Stay tuned for